there we go. There we go. Uh, yeah, it's the final countdown. I had a very dramatic countdown running. Let's see if there's a reminder that I'm alive. Let's see if it works. See if my entire setup with my people and me hearing the chat works. So, Mad Oak, can you give me a shout out? See if it works. Yeah, very good. It's a little bit delayed, of course, but welcome everybody. Um, yeah, I'm going to give a presentation today about Advent of CTF. I'm very happy you're all here for our 10th meetup already. Um, yeah, we are going into a new year already in which we will actually start celebrating our 1 year anniversary. Um, to mark your calendars because it will be a deviating time. Our first meetup was on April 15th, and April 14th this year is actually a Wednesday. And so we thought we would do our 1 year celebration on Wednesday, April 14th. So mark that in your calendar. Um, we are going to try and get some very nice things going. While somebody blows their flute, very cool. We're trying to get some really nice things going with Hack the Box. Maybe have some people from the Hack the Box join and give the party whoop whoop. So we'll see. But tonight I'm going to talk about a project that I did. To add some screen. There we go. Nice, bright, and yellow. I'm going to talk about the advent of CTF. Most of you who are watching have participated in the advent of CTF, and it was quite something. I'm very proud of the project itself, and I'm also very well proud. Proud is a very difficult word, but very honored that you all played it, and most of you actually went all the way to the end. So that's very cool. So I thought I would reflect on the advent of CTF and give you some insight as to how it was built and what is part of the infrastructure to actually support it. Um, so let's give it a go. First, for the people that do not know, as we always have some new people in the group, who am I? My name is Arjen. On Discord and on Hackbox, I'm called as Credit P. And in my day-to-day job, I'm actually chief lecturer for cybersecurity at Hogeschool Novi, which is a University of Applied Science in the Netherlands. And next to that, I'm also an independent hacker. So uh, I'm a hired gun. I help people with software security, infrastructure security, or policies for their organization to get into a more better security posture. So, yeah, and what does that have to do with Advent of CTF? Well, I love security. I do it from my day-to-day basis. I teach people about security, and I focus on basically three things, and those things are very, very large in that sense. Reverse engineering. I'm also a Kaspersky malware reverse engineering instructor. Yay. I do about a lot of application security, both binaries and web application security, and infrastructure security. All these things match very nicely with Hack the Box, of course. That's why I love using Hack the Box in my day-to-day work. Um, but it also is very suited for a CTF. And this time we focused on web application security. But yeah. Most of the time, people also ask me, what kind of certificates do you have? Well, in December, I got my OSWE, I have my OSCP, and somewhere along the line, I did my CEH. You can ask me all kinds of questions about it, but yeah, I did it, right? So, so that's me. And today, talking about Advent of CTF, about hosting a month-long CTF. Somebody has me on the feedback loop. Where, where, where is that? Yeah, 1 minute. Um, if you hear a dog in the background, my dog is also here, and he's being a little bit pain in the ass. But we'll see. So a month-long CTF. A CTF normally is something that we run in a couple of days or a very short time. And I figured I would do the insane thing of running it for an entire month. So this is my story. One thing that you might know is these beautiful graphics that we'll see throughout. Um, they were actually made by one of my colleagues, or actually two of my colleagues, who really was into Cyberpunk 2077 and was somewhat disappointed. But it ended up with a lot of very cool graphics for. Oh, I'm going to put it on mute. I put my Discord on mute, so if there's any questions, put them in the comments on YouTube. So yeah, so the advent of CTF. Let's see how it goes. What is my CTF experience up to last year, December? Well, I hosted tiny CTFs, like 1 day or one evening CTF challenges, in which students or potential students or some friends just had a fun evening. We would have some drinks and it would be a ball. Um, dog. The dog is. I'm going to fix the dog. Look at this. My dog likes to sleep under a blanket. There you go. The challenge of working at home, right? So very tiny CTF challenges, and then I had this idea that I would do something bigger for 2020. It's the lockdown, of course, and we're all stuck at home. And I thought, well, let's do something which is somewhat more meaningful. So I decided to take on this challenge. Um, for me alone, my history is in software development before I became a security person. And one of the things that software developers have during the month of December is the advent of code. I sometimes mix them up. But the advent of code is also a month-long challenge. And so I figured I would piggyback on that idea basically and say like, I want to do something cool. I want to challenge my students. That was my first idea, to do a in-school program in which I have the challenges for the entire month. But as we're also in the Hack the Box meetup, I thought it would be very cool to take that idea and to expand it into the Hack the Box meetup community. So I thought, well, maybe like 40, 50 people. We'll have some fun. We do some challenges, and maybe they'll learn something, right? Especially my students, they would learn something. But for the community, it would be cool as well. And in all honesty, I thought it would be a very nice way to say, hey, Novi, I actually built a cybersecurity curriculum for Novi and I'm teaching it. So I thought it would be a very fun way to get people interested in the materials and maybe have some students that do not know they want to be my students yet, right? So those were my main goals and my main drivers. And I think they all succeeded quite nicely. But we'll see. Um, so yeah, so I decided I would do a CTF, a month-long CTF, and I started somewhere in the summer of 2020 with the first ideas. It's still hot, hot and humid. Um, but yeah, I started thinking about what it would be to actually do a CTF that takes a month, that gets people up in the morning, every single morning, to actually do the challenge and get them to return and do it even more. Um, yeah. Uh, so my idea was it should be easy to get into. Everybody should be able to get started with some very basic challenges. and they should be able to learn as they go. So there should not be like new things coming in during the CTF. So it should be very, in Dutch we call it stapelen. It should build upon knowledge that you've gained, especially when you're a new person. So at that time, I also decided that I would create challenges and I would immediately provide write ups after the next challenge was opened up, simply so that people could get into it and could actually follow along. And if they get stuck, they would be able to do the day's challenge after solving the previous one. It changed quite subtly during the entire process, but yeah, that was my idea. But then, if it's too easy, it's also not very fun for the community. So I thought it would be also very nice to have some challenging things for experienced players. And these two things do not really mix quite well, because if it's challenging for experienced players, it's undoable for easy players getting into it. And if it's easy for, or it's doable for people just getting started, it is way too easy for experienced players. So it's a very difficult thing to balance out. Um, but the entire idea behind it is to teach people about CTFs, about known types of vulnerabilities. So I thought it should be something I should invest in and try. Um, Having the write-ups available right after made it easier for the people that got stuck uh, due to lack of experience to actually continue. So in the end, it seemed to be quite good. So yeah, so that was the summer of 2020, and then the thing starts with what do you do? What kind of challenges would you put in? How do you measure difficulty? How do you measure the effectiveness of some simple instructions or stacked instructions? For instance, having introducing like the dev tools in a first challenge. How does it help somebody in the second challenge, and third challenge, and all the way up? And most importantly, I wanted people to not have to rely on external tools. This did not work entirely throughout the entire thing, but just to be able to use your browser to do this. Um, so yeah, it required quite a lot of research. So I, I decided, well, let's first start with classic CTF type challenges. So I looked at things like SQL injection challenges or template injections and variations of those. Most CTF challenges that you'll find online, they start with very basic challenges that go into the browser, into DevTools, and then look at cookies and stuff like that. Um, so I took most of those as a basis, and then I started looking at it, how difficult it was. I actually don't tell my students, but I actually trialed a lot of things on them. Matt Oak is one here. He will vouch for that. He had to do some quite interesting challenges. Yeah, so I started with the classics, but then I thought, well, everybody knows these things, especially the experienced players, so that was not good enough. So I basically went into a study of CTF challenges. I actually played a couple of hundred, I think, various um, continents in the sense of try to find resources, write-ups, and try to find good resources, challenges that were doable, not that they had to reverse engineer a VirtualBox SCSI driver, for instance, but just web-based challenges. Most of the time, if you look closely, most CTF challenges hover around the same types of failures or failures features of the PHP language, for instance, things like magic hashes, comparisons, stuff like that, or the default, hey, do a SQL injection. And those are in the challenges, of course. But I also try to find out some really neat things that are not that straight out of a playbook. So yeah, went a lot of time into the CTF challenges, and I cherry picked my favorite ones. There's some very cool ones, especially where it's the PHP, where you actually use a function to introduce the value that is stored in a file into the memory, so that the variable that is being used prints out the output of evaluated code. That was such a very simple, tiny challenge, but it blows your mind if you when you look at it for the first time. Um, Also, there's some very neat tricks in JavaScript land that I really liked. And for all those challenges, except for one or two, I actually built my own version. I built it from ground up into something that was fun, like having an emoji picker, so you can actually, when you're stuck, you can try and find cool emojis, stuff like that. I built my own versions, and one of the most significant things that I did was to make the decision to actually use Docker for everything. And this is also a bit of an introduction to the infrastructure that is part of it. Our Docker use, my Docker use of every challenge has to be playable in a container, so I can give it to somebody to test it. Actually tried this out on my students again, in which I gave them Docker image and see how well it works. Um, the significance of this is that for some challenges you need specific versions of specific software, and those are very difficult to put on a single machine. Um, if you want to run three versions of PHP, for instance. So a container is quite necessary, and it should be self-contained. So sadly, I have like 6, 7 databases in my infrastructure in the Docker containers, but that's okay because they all play their own role. So before the presentation, we were talking about it, and you saw my certification as OSWE, which is the Offensive Security Web Application Expert thingy. Um, yeah, I was doing that during building these challenges. So I was studying for that, and one part of it is analysis of code and looking for funky usage of programming language constructs. So yeah, I was studying while building the challenges. So some of these challenges, and if you've done them and you've done OSWE, you will pick out one for sure. Has some very deep connection with OSWE because I thought it was a very cool or interesting way to do something, and I actually transported that into a new challenge. It was quite fun and quite. If you're thinking about doing the OSWE, it's very supporting to actually build CTF challenges. I guess most people that actually do OSWE and finish it will actually write up some challenges. So that's a very good thing to do. But one thing that our CTF does not have compared to the OSWE is the ability or the introduction into source code analysis. You just get something to test, and then you figure out how it should work. So yeah, from my research and from all my efforts, I had this grandiose idea of it would start out very simple and then it would be complex at the end. And from point A to point B, there would be a very nice, simple line that goes up, and that would be it. So our complexity in this very dim graph would be straight up. It would be linearly up as we progress in challenges. it becomes more difficult. In actuality, however, that was not the truth. I actually took this beautiful graph. I stole it from the Advent of Code, Michael van der Scheep. Um, and what you see here is a plot of the top 20 finishers. And so the actual complexity is more of a whoop than anything else. The amount of knowledge that is in our community and in our top players, so if you take the top 20 players, it is immense. Especially they are well trained, well versed in CTFs, which is also not surprising that the Hack the Box community is very good, of course. So most of the challenges, as you see here, and the time on the left hand side is the time at which the person finishes compared to 8 a.m. in the morning. So most of the challenges here on this line were finished by the top 20 within 3 hours of starting. Only after about the halfway marker, we start going up a little bit. And day 16, 17 were very nice, but day 15 and 18 were very easy compared to that. And then day 23 gave them all something that they had not seen before, which was quite nice to see. It is only that people started finishing early here, was that I was giving several hints. So, yeah. And then the last one was like a, hey, we finished, let's stop the complexity. It was unintended, but yeah, there's actually some mistakes that were made, um, but we'll get into that in a little bit. I want to also highlight the badges. Um, the Advent of CTF month-long competition, 24 days. So I thought it would be fun to actually have people share something on Twitter and stuff like that, or have something for their own blog to reference to. And one thing that we decided to do, or the designers, they committed to making 24 unique badges. If you know any graphical designers, they are generally not very keen to say, "Well, I'll do 24 of them. It's fine." So it was quite nice. It was a very intense project, and up till the last day, the last batch was being made, basically. But they are very cool, very nice, and I hope to have like a poster of them one day that I can put on my wall or put in a frame or something, because it's quite nice that what they made, and it is. I think it's a feat that will not soon be repeated, because they spend a lot of time in it. So I want to thank them for it. Yeah, that was very cool. And the very cool thing was that most of the people that actually did write ups used them in their blogs as well. So that was very cool to see. Yeah, yeah, building the infrastructure. Let's see. Uh, I'll use my new Hack the Box canteen. Building the infrastructure. Having challenges is one thing. Challenges are one thing to make, and they run in your Docker. But then you think about, hey, I'm going to allow people from outside to connect here. These people are hackers. These people are trained to get into something, and then, if they can, to get a reverse shell. These people are trained to use tools that do a lot of things automatically. And what I do not want is to have tools that do stuff automatically. I don't want reverse shells. Um, I don't want any problems. I want to have a carefree infrastructure, and those things are very hard to combine. We did a CTF in the Meetup. I think it was October, November, one of those days. And one of the problems that we ran into is that people started using tools, and they totally smashed the Docker instances. And that was fun, of course, for a short while until you actually try to solve the challenge yourself. Um, so I thought about this, and I thought there should be a way to do this. So here is my setup, um, or in the coming slides, it will be my setup. Problem is, I had no idea how big it would be. How big, as in the number of players or the amount of traffic. It was all kind of relatively new. Um, so the thing that I had is that I had 24 challenges plus a website plus a batch server in Docker containers and my CTFD instance, of course. They were all in Dockers, and if I run that Docker on my quite beefy desktop machine, it took quite some memory and resources. So I went and picked out a VPS that matches that. um, I basically went to DigitalOcean because I had some credit there, and I picked out a droplet, one droplet, as it is called. It's basically VPS. I picked the $40 one, which has quite some memory. Disk space was not very a problem. Memory is the thing, and it had like 4 CPUs, I think, and for a cloud droplet type thingy, that's quite significant. If in comparison, if you run a website and it is quite popular, you can still get away with a $5 instance. Um, but yeah, one thing I chose for DigitalOcean is that it also had this really great, has this great ability to just spawn something, just to say, give me a new box. So in my mind, I decided, well, I have this constraint of my Docker needing at least that machine. But if I run into trouble, and it was kind of naive, right? If I run into trouble, I can always spawn a new box. So I tried that. It didn't work. Of course, the box spawned, but just moving part of your infrastructure is quite difficult. So I had to retry that a couple of times, and I ended up with a solution that works. So my setup was to have one droplet, and if I get into trouble, I'll just spawn a new one. And that was my brilliant idea. Um, so I decided one thing that I need to install on my droplet is nginx. I chose nginx because why not? I guess it should also be doable with an Apache, but I chose nginx. And that became my main web server. And I used Let's Encrypt for SSL, which is kind of straightforward, of course. You just run certbot and it does it for you. Um, and then the thing about the challenge. For every single challenge, I created its own vhost. And as I had my own domain name, I had the possibility to just say 1.adventofctf.com, 2.adventofctf.com. And for each one of those, I created a vhost. And this vhost had a proxy pass to a Docker instance. And Docker binds on the port. So you start your Docker, and for instance, challenge one would be Docker running on port 10,001, and challenge two would be a Docker running on port 10,002, etc. And my vhost would just proxy to those ports. That worked quite nicely. It is actually a very reliable and scalable thing, simply because you can say, uh, if my challenge is constrained in another way than I anticipated, so for instance, it will only allow for 10 people concurrently to test, you could actually add multiple instances of your Docker on different ports, of course, but nginx will load balance over those. So that was quite nice. And it allowed me to actually run everything on one. And then if I got into trouble, I could spawn a different machine, put my Docker image on there, which was already pre-built, and just pulled it in, and then just tell nginx to use that machine as a source for a proxy. So that worked flawlessly. But that meant Dockerizing everything. I already made that decision, but it really solidified it. Um, so every component from website to challenge to bad server is in a container. This also has the downside, for instance, that if I want to update a badge or if I want to update a file, I need to update the container, which is not without its own problems. Because one of the criteria that I mentioned earlier, being able to spawn a reverse shell, not wanting that meant that I had to cut off infrastructure or network traffic to the outside. But that means that you cannot build a Docker image, as it will, for instance, pull something from Debian apt repositories or from the Python thingy or for npm stuff like that. So it had up and downside. One thing, a rule was to Dockerize everything and run everything 24/7. So at every given point, all the challenges were running. The only thing that was not on was the free host in nginx connecting to the Docker instance. Then, and there's this thing. I don't know if Jorian is here today, but sometimes people thought it was fun to do something. And one of the things pointed out Jorian here, and he was a good sport about it. He decided that there was a challenge in which people could use an extra hint. So he added a flag.txt within a hint to where the actual flag.txt was. Of course, that was my mistake, right? That he was able to do that. But when you have everything Dockerized, you can just restart it, and everything is reset. So in the end, I ended up automatically restarting a couple of challenges. We'll get to the ones that were done. But yeah, there were a couple of people, and I know Jorian actually did this because we talked about it. But there was somebody else who actually added a heading to a HTML file or PHP file that says you should not look at this. But yeah, that was fun, quite interesting when it happens. So yeah, and everything actually works with this beautiful tool that is like older than me, cron a cron job. For every fee host at 8 a.m., I created a line that says at 8 a.m. on day 2 of December, activate this fee host and restart nginx. And that was my magic. All the fee hosts were set in sites available, and they went to site enabled at 8 a.m. And this worked by just creating 24 lines of cron, or basically one line in the shell script, basically. But yeah, that worked beautifully. It's activate the vhost of the day and restarted nginx, and it never failed. And later on, when stuff went pear-shaped, as they say in the United States, when there was code execution or a writable thing, I just added a line to every 5 or 10 minutes restart a instance, and it worked beautifully. It is highly recommended. So we have a droplet that has nginx. On that machine, there's Docker, which has all the instances booted up. The nginx has vhosts to every Docker container, but not everything is enabled at the same time. So we have a beautiful setup that allows us to do the challenges. But yeah, there's this thing called monitoring. And yeah, that would mean that arranging a lot of more things. Actually, DigitalOcean already monitors a lot of usage things like memory, CPU, stuff like that. So we would see that If somebody had a piece of code running that took 100%, it would show in the CPU graph, stuff like that. And you can actually put alerts in, which is quite nice. But I don't know if the challenges actually are working or not. I just know that the machine is healthy. So I employed a Dutch system called a PEEP system, which is basically complaining users. We had our Discord channel for Advent of CTF, and if something broke, people would say, "Hey, I think something is broke," and then I would look at it and see what's going on. Which, by the way, I was working the entire time, of course. Sometimes became quite an unhappy moment, especially if it's at 8 a.m. and somebody is takes something out quite significantly. Um, and then I have to go eat my breakfast, take my laptop, and work on the thing. So I feel like a real engineer at that time. But this works. In the future, I would probably add some more active monitoring and then restart the container. But that's minor. Um, yeah, and then anti-cheat. I think the thing most people are very interested in knowing how it works. I had a couple of anti-cheat systems. Remember, I don't want people using automated tools. I don't want shell execution. I want people that try to abuse the system, like using a Hydra to do a login thing or something. I don't want that. It's meant to just challenge you and do it manually and get the joy of doing it. So I figured out a couple of methods. Um, First one was a simple blacklist or allow list, non-allow list for Nginx that would look at the user agent, and if the user agent was in a list of forbidden things like SQL map, Hydra, stuff like that, it would get a 403. You're not allowed to do this, 401. I think I used 403 for a reason I will get back in a little bit. Um, and then I also said, well, we do it manually. So unless you are very active, you should be able to just do it within a set bounds. So I used the Nginx rate limiting, which is a default feature, which is awesome. And I said, well, you could do 5 requests per second with a burst of 8. So you could have a short window in which you do a little bit more. And if you fail this rate limiting, you will basically get a 403, and that would feed into fail to ban. And if you trigger your rate limiting or your forbidden usage, the fail to ban would actually temp ban you for 10 minutes, which is an awesome system which worked really, really well if you enable it. Um, I did not forget. The thing is that I had a situation where I messed with the IP tables, and for a little bit of time, fail to ban was not running because I messed up. Right, it happens. But over the entire thing, it worked really well. Um, of course, I put a firewall on it that prevented outbound connections, which sadly also meant that outbound connections to build Docker images was also disabled. So every time I had to rebuild a Docker image, I had to adjust the firewall, rebuild the Docker image, and then enable the firewall again. But it prevented things like reverse shells and stuff like that. So that was quite good. And the last thing to actually get around people messing about was to harden containers. Containers by themselves are generally not a very safe thing. They are a image or configuration of a system that is not meant to go into production. You actually have to do stuff to it. Most people don't know this, but you have to do it. So I did things like running services as a different user. Default, it would be by root. That's a bad idea. So give them their own user and then remove the write permissions of the directories that has access to stuff like that. There's some instances that I forgot. So Julian was able to create his own flag, for instance, stuff like that. Um, But yeah, it's in general it worked really nice. Especially the filter ban, it is a very good way to temporarily remove pain in the asses. Because when somebody runs a Hydra or a SQL map or stuff like that, a Docker instance gets really pounded and it does not respond really well, and everybody suffers. So by temp banning them, it is quite nice. Yeah, and then the cheaters, we sadly have them. I used CTFD as the de facto capture the flag dashboard, and I actually created some stats to see if a user directly followed by a user that uh, their connection between the users when they submit flags. You can pick out the ones that say to the other one, "Hey, this is the flag," and they get really tightly connected. There's a bunch of pairs that either work together or actually piggybacked off of each other. Um, I spoke with most of them in the top 20 in some form to figure out if they were actually cheating or just working together, stuff like that. Actually kicked off a couple of people because it was very obvious that they were doing the wrong thing. Um, but most people did not have a bother with those. There's a group that I will discuss later on. Um, yeah, the experienced people, this is all technical, blah, blah, right? It's containers, it's infrastructure, and it is the road to it. But for me, it was my first time hosting a CTF challenge that would take an entire month, 24 days. It's not almost a month, to the point that every day at 8 a.m. I would be like wide awake, waking up and checking Discord and making sure everything's running, and then late at night making changes, stuff like that. So for me, how did this feel? What was the experience like? Um, I think a Relevation gave permission to use his quote. I think this entire screenshot, actually the last line, made it all worthwhile for me, as I'm an educator by heart. It is in Dutch, so I'll read it and translate it. He says, I've learned more in the last 10 days of the CTF than I have learned in a year of self study. Really cool. Um, yeah, that was the thing that I was going for, right? Being able to teach people new things or interesting tricks that they can use. So this entire quote, this entire one line, made it all worthwhile for me to go through the entire experience. Um, but yeah, there's some other things as well. But I want to take this quote. I actually collect what we call geluksmomentjes, happy moments. And it's when like a student that had a really tough time gets back to you and says, "Well, I found it my dream job and it worked out and it's really cool." Or like this, I'm doing your CTF and I learned so much. These are happy moments. You think back to these afterwards. So that's very cool. Um, but that's my emotional part. Um, I started out with the idea of having 50-ish players, maybe 100. That would be awesome. In the end, we had 500 plus players. About 420, 430 were active players. They did at least one challenge. So that was awesome. I never thought it would be so much. So there were some quite noticeable names between them as well. I personally was very impressed that Lampje of Hack the Box fame was started to participate. He joined a little bit later, but he ended up in the top 10. Jim Phil, he is a Twitch streamer, hacker streamer guy from Poland. He started playing as well. It was quite awesome. But most fun I had was the discussions in the Discord and then talking about the challenges, how people solve them, and how our community actually enjoyed playing them. So that was most fun for me. Um, there, sadly, to my big disappointment, there were also people that just want some hints. They would create an account, uh, they would add a flag to it, and then use that to grab a hint and then solve the next one. It was quite disappointing, and it became more pronounced during the later challenges. So I decided to stop providing hints and just say, well, if you want a hint, send me a message. In the end, several people did, but most challenges were able to be done without actually having the hint. So that was, I wonder if the hints are actually necessary, but yeah. And then there's some very fun war stories of stuff that goes wrong. I'll take a zip and then we'll go to it. Um, yeah, for the ones that played, the first days were very exciting. In the sense, for me, it was very exciting because people started doing the challenges, and then on day two, somebody was able to do day three, and I thought, what? And the entire Discord was all like, "Hey, this is not correct. What is going on?" And with my friend Zurix90, he came to the conclusion, "Dude, you forgot the firewall." I actually forgot to turn on the firewall, and so the Docker instances were all available. So in theory, you could have done every single challenge. Um, the guy who actually did it, the story was that he ran a scan and thought, well, maybe I'm supposed to do challenge like that. Um, we had a chat about it, and I actually know him or the company he works for and the people that work there. So I decided to uh, go on his blue eyes. I gave him a punishment of not having the points for the third day and not for the fourth day, and then he could participate. And in the end, he went along all the way to about halfway. On day six, there is a very fun challenge. The idea was to have a SQL union challenge in which it was truncated. So everything that you saw on the screen, it had IDs, and then it had the content of the tables. And then I actually forgot to truncate the first column. So it was very easily solved by just using the first column instead of the other two. Um, it happens. On day seven, two disappointments right after each other. I tried, or I attempted to simplify or give some more visual hints in a SQL injection that was blind. It was supposed to be a time-based blind attack. In the end, it was a horrible, simple union attack that was not not noticed until we actually got the first results, and we were like, "That was a quick solve. How did that happen?" Um, on day 20 and 24, mostly known as the tic tac toe challenges, I actually wrote a tic tac toe game that was to be solved from a losing state. You had to change it into a winning state for Santa. And there was a combination of arguments that, when said correctly, it would pronounce a winner, even though the logic said it would not be a winner. Simply because I forgot to reset those parameters at the beginning of the function instead of halfway through the function. And so day 20 and day 24 basically had, or they had the same solution, which was a very unintended solution. Luckily, most people did not figure that one out, and so there was a lot of people that did it on the correct way. Um, but yeah, in hindsight, these were my four moments that I went like, oh, and luckily, or sadly for me, most of them were in the first couple of challenges. So I was very anxious every time a challenge was solved, and if it was solved within an hour, I thought like, oh, but yeah, then we got to the JWT or the JavaScript Node.js challenges, and it took hours for the challenge to be fixed. So that was awesome. Yeah, and then there's this thing about giving hackers code execution. That might not be the smartest thing you ever do when you actually design challenges. Because I thought, well, it will be okay, and, in full support of your ethical system, and that you will not abuse it. So the machine ended up being fully loaded, 100% in a while loop, doing stuff. It was horrible. Took a little while to fix, and um, I fixed it by just restarting the container every 5 minutes. So at most, there would be 5 minutes total CPU time. And the other one was the right bit. I did the hardening of the Docker images afterwards, and I basically forgot one or two. So some players were able to mess about with the PHP file, and luckily most of them were harmless, and they would just add some funny bits and say like "hello" or "hey, nothing to see here" or "the flag is somewhere else," stuff like that. But it messes people up, so I had to fix that on the fly. Yeah, and then there's this thing about doing a certification while hosting a CTF, while the CTF is going on. Um, I think the CTF really helped me prepare for the OSWE exam. That's a good thing. But I took my exam on day 17, 18, 19. So 17 and 18 was my exam, and 19 was my report day. And I had my code execution challenges on day 17 and 18. That was not that was not the smartest thing ever. So during the breaks I took for my OSWE, I actually was looking at how the CTF was doing and fixing things. So that was a sad moment. And then there's this thing about starting at 8 a.m., which sounds like a really good idea because during the week I'm up at 8 a.m. In a weekend, I generally try to sleep in, and I have this advice for anybody who is going to run a CTF: always consult your wife when making life choices. Um, my wife did not think it was very funny on December 24th at 8 a.m. that I was getting up during my holiday to look at my CTF, stuff like that. She was very supportive of the CTF, but the 8 a.m. thing, no, that was not a very good idea. So, yeah, something to learn from for next time. So, yeah, then there were prices, and we were talking about this before the presentation in the Meetup. Hackbox, as we are part of the Hackbox community, they said, well, um, when we started out, we thought of 50 people. So they said, oh, I'll do top three. We'll give them some HTTP Academy cubes so they can play with the platform, and it would be fun. In hindsight, we could have done some more, I think. But the top 20, and this thing is what I really, really love. And I love that Novi is making this possible because it's quite costly to do. So I want to say that it's a very substantial price. A challenge coin, for those that do not know, a challenge coin is a physical coin, like a spherical coin, like you would have a dollar or euro coin piece, but bigger, that commemorates participating in a tournament or a CTF. Um, I personally never have ever received a challenge coin because they are generally for the top 10 in this massive competition. And so I went to my marketing director for the school and said, like, I'm not spending a lot of money on this CTF, so can I have some budget to do something really cool? And that would be to have a challenge coin. I found a company in the Netherlands that makes them, and they are being made at this moment. They are being actually cast into a mold that was specifically made for the challenge. And during February, I think halfway February, we'll start shipping them out. So maybe with the next meetup, I can actually show them. But I have a design that we used. I want to say I do not know about the color. Right? Uh, it is a bit of a surprise for me as well. Marketing people, they actually took this over and they want to surprise me as well. But I actually got the design of it from a third party ish. So this is what the coin looks like. It will be 5 centimeters, so that's about this big. So it fits in the palm of your hand, palm of your hand basically. And it will have the 20, it will have one of the drawings, and it will be in 3D cast, so it will have a very fine print. So it will be metal, so it's big. It will be quite heavy in that regard. And it is something that you can put in a box or on the shelf and stuff like that. So to really commemorate this CTF and the fun we had. So yeah, I'm quite looking forward to receiving it. I never had it. I did not end in the top 20, but I actually get one as well. So that's very cool. So yeah, lessons learned, and then I'll wrap up. The lessons learned from this CTF for me is to always double check your info, get somebody else to check it. Don't do it yourself, but get people to keep you sharp. Um, Next time, I want to provide more diverse challenges. We were very focused on the web applications at this time, so and you can only do so much, right? Um, to keep it more interesting, there should be more diverse challenges. Um, to do the maintenance, I should really have more people, some volunteers or people that are involved in other ways. And 8 a.m. might not be the wisest thing ever. So maybe move that to the evening. For somebody, it is always in a time zone that is not very useful. So we figure out what will happen. But for me, these are the most important things I take away. And then there's 2021. We are in 2021. It's January, so should I already be thinking about this? So yes, yeah, I'm going to do it. I hereby already commit to actually making the new CTF for December, and I have an entire year to think and prepare and plan and do everything that is necessary. The only thing is, it will not be at 8 a.m. Maybe 9 a.m. Maybe that would be useful. But, we'll see. So, in the meantime, somebody already checked it and said, well, hey, I can no longer do the challenges. Yeah, the thing is that even though it's just a 40 buck machine, the thing on how to arrange it for now fell through, so I had to take it offline and I have to get that sorted out. But I decided to just open it and provide the challenges so you can run it. They are on GitHub. If you go to adventofctf.com, there's a link. You can go to the challenges themselves. And how what you do is basically the following. Make sure you have Docker. Then you can run the build.sh. Then go to the challenge of your choice and you do a Docker Compose up, and it will bring the challenge up. Look into the Docker Compose file, what port it is, and you are good to go. You can run it on your own. That's the beauty of Docker. It's the beauty of having a reproducible environment. Yeah, so that was quite awesome being able to do it like this. Um, yeah, and with that, I would like to say thank you for listening. I hope your questions about the CTF were answered. And I'm sure if you're very interested in this year's challenge or last year's challenge, next year you will participate as well. So very cool. So let's take a look if there's any questions on beautiful Discord or in the chat itself. So, all right, let's see. There's a couple of questions, I think. Or hey, I'm new. Okay, I knew. Very welcome. Um, Give your dog a HTB sweater. Yeah, well, I have a very nice hoodie. It's the old model, of course, but quite happy with it. It's a very comfortable one, so that's nice. Um, he's not the only one. Yeah, very good. Let's see. I put my headphones on again in the Discord, so if you have any questions, feel free to yell at me. Um, Will you reconsider time this year? Yes, I will. Time in the sense of ADM, yeah, definitely. Um, if I run, will Yoyan be in my machine as well? I'm sure you can get him to hack your machine if you want to, right? Run everything on public VPS, share the IP, you will not be hacked. No problem, sure. Now that's the thing, you ask people to hack you, you will be hacked. Um, Aryan, what machine to run the build? Well, actually, everything that runs Docker would work. So if you have a Windows machine that you want to run it on, it will work. Basically, because it uses Docker, so it's an environment on its own. I would highly recommend to just use a Kali or no Ubuntu. It's basically apt-get install docker.io, uh, adding yourself to the Docker group and just running the script. It works beautifully. Let's see. Yeah, the Git, I will also share the presentation and it will be on Hack the Wereld as well tomorrow. So the link will be there. And else, adventofctf.com, there is actually a link to the challenges as well. Yeah, it says woke up at 6 a.m. for Advent of Code, 8 a.m. for CTF and KringleCon. Yeah, you had a busy month, right? Good thing you have a holiday. Um, who did not finish had to drop off due to son's holiday hack. Yeah, yeah, cool. Let's see. Very nice. See tech. I should be able to hear you. Can somebody speak? Maddock, can you speak? Apparently, I do not hear you now at the moment. Hi. Yeah, I hear you. Now I hear the name, but I was hearing Mohammed. Yeah, I hear you. I hear you. There's a lot of background noise as well. Yeah, maybe you can type the question. I think he wants to. If I anticipate the question, the teams based, and that will do it. Yeah, I'm thinking about teams. Yes, yes. Want to give it another try, Mohammed? Yeah. What is the to do it in teams? Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, I hear you very well. I was listening to recap for the people on YouTube. Mohammed asks, would you consider a teams-based competition as part of the CTF? And I actually thought about that as well for a more competitive type thing. As Mohammed correctly says, it removes a bit of the learning experience, but somebody who is new will probably not be part of a team. Um, so that might still work. It's definitely something I'm thinking about for next year or this year, basically. Yeah. Let's see. Yeah, the Simplified's correct. There's a little bit of a delay between YouTube and Discord, so um, that's fine. Darkest asks, when is the next CTF? Well, the advent of CTF will be December. I There might be a CTF somewhere during the year as well, but we'll see. Thanks a lot for hosting. I think it's great. And you know, to share lessons. Loved it and can't wait for next year. Hiras is full of compliments. Thank you, Hiras. It was very fun having you in the competition as well. You did very well, so thank you for participating. Teams competition. Let's see. Great job. Thank you very well. I think there's no additional questions. Yeah, there's this. I'm no hacker says, "Hey, maybe not December. We'll think about it, but for now, the idea is to have the Advent in December, of course, as a community type thing. There's several companies like Sans also doing December things, so maybe it's a little bit crowded. Um, Maybe there a summer CTF would be nice as well, but there's nothing in a plan for now. So oh, what about scoring? Would you consider another scoring system or will it be the same? Yes, the scoring system is quite interesting. I did not discuss that, but basically, what I did was that every challenge was 100 points more than the previous challenge. And the idea was that in the beginning, I thought it would be very tiny. And so the idea was more of that people would get points and feel good. But then we got the offer to do prizes. Then we had a top 20. Then we did a challenge coin. So we needed a system to do actual scoring. So we came up with a system to actually reward the top 10 of each challenge. Um, in the next one, there will be a better scoring system because we'll actually start with the idea of having a competition type thing, but still be able for people to participate in all forms and walks of life. So, okay, subsite where members can post their own CTS, for example, that should be interesting to learn. Semperfied actually asks the question, would it be an idea to create a subsite where we can host our own CTFs? Well, I think that's a very good business model. That's something that is in the range of a hack the box or try hack me or proving ground. It's quite interesting. It's basically what the old phone hub did. So depends on connection pack. Let's see what else. One summer, if we cannot go on holiday this year. Yeah, that's what I was thinking as well. If we are still doing lockdowns and stuff like that, it would be quite fun to have a summer of CTF, something like that. Um, yeah, cool, cool. Bring your challenge concept. Bring your own challenge. Yes, bio. So with that, I want to thank you for watching the presentation. I will terminate the YouTube video. We'll continue in the Discord for our chat and socializing. So thank you. See you next time. Bye bye.